So welcome to the overview of the APHIS National Veterinary Stockpile webinar. Thanks for joining us today. Today we'll be learning about the National Veterinary Stockpile, its catalog, how it's activated, and their training strategy. With that, I'd like to introduce our presenter for today, Dr. Joanna Davis, the State and Federal Liaison for the National Veterinary Stockpile in the Logs Center. So Joanna, I'll go ahead and hand things over to you.
All right, Kristen, thanks. Thank you very much. Good afternoon and good morning to everybody. Hope everyone had a nice holiday weekend last weekend. So I will just jump right in on this. I'm going to try and keep my eye on the chat in case something comes in. If I miss any chats during the presentation, then I will try and catch them at the very end. And then I think when it's all done, if there were any hands to raise or anybody wanted to ask that question. So I will try and keep up with that best I can. So let me minimize that camera here. So I just wanted to take this opportunity. I think many of you are probably familiar with the National Veterinary Stockpile, especially for vet services, wildlife services, because we've had so many disease outbreaks really almost constantly for the last 10 years. But it's been a few years since we've done an overview and an introduction. We just released the updated catalog. And on Thursday, we're going to have Andy Titsworth, that's also with the Logistics Center, give a presentation on how to order resources. So hopefully many of you will be able to join on Thursday, especially if you're the one that has to collect the data to find out what you need to order. And also if you need to be the one doing the ordering so that you'll be familiar with that process. Okay. So the National Veterinary Stockpile is part of APHIS, Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, Veterinary Services, and we are in the logistics sector. So that is our primary goal, is that we do the logistics piece of this. We plan, we prepare, we work with states to prepare for if and when they have a disease outbreak so that we are able to take in what resources the state needs. And then with our resources that we've got, whether it's through our warehouse, whether it is through our contractors, that we're able to get those resources to state as they need it. So we are not really the policy part. We are strictly the logistics piece of the response. So why do we have a National Veterinary Stockpile? So after 9/11, hopefully if you're old enough, you remember that that's when the Department of Homeland Security was created, and President Bush created the Homeland Security Presidential Directives, and there were many, all addressing different critical infrastructure in the United States in the wake of the terror attacks. So one of those being that the requirement was to have the Secretary of Agriculture develop a stockpile to have sufficient quantities of animal vaccines, countermeasures, therapeutic products that could affect animal and human health and the economy, so that we are able to deploy it within 24 hours of an outbreak. And so countermeasures, that's a word that we use a lot, but countermeasures is really just what you use to counteract whatever it may be that is going on. And so that can, they talk about that in a lot of different realms, but countermeasures are, if we have an animal disease, what is our primary method? Oftentimes it's depopulation, or if we use vaccines. So countermeasures is just kind of a big word for the response tools that we're going to be using in an outbreak. Now, at the end of 2022, President Biden's administration replaced these Homeland Security Presidential Directives, or HSPDs, with national security memos. And so the one that correlates to HSPD 9, that is National Security Memo, or NSM 16. And I put a hyperlink on there. This is being recorded, and then we can also make the slides available. I can also drop it in the chat too. And you can see the entire National Security Memo. It's, I think, maybe about 20 some pages. But specifically in this one, this is when it talks about food and agriculture systems and supply chains. A lot of this came out of the wake of COVID and some of the slaughter supply slowdowns that we had, just the way that the world has changed so much in the last, 2, 3, 4 years. And so this is to improve our critical infrastructure on the federal side, the state side, locally in the private sector, so that we can help maintain food security and public health preparedness. So our mission in the National Veterinary Stockpile, like I said, that is to provide the countermeasures, that supplies, equipment, vaccines, response support services, which those are the contractors for those of you who have been on responses and are familiar with our contractors. And these services are for our states, tribes, and our territories. So this is not really to provide those countermeasures directly to the industry or to private practitioners or to just private producers. They're not the ones that order this. This is all in conjunction with the state, tribal, or territorial regulatory authorities. So right now I would like to introduce to you some of our other logistics center and National Veterinary Stockpile, some of the personnel that many of you will probably be dealing with if you've got to work with a National Veterinary Stockpile in an outbreak. And so I'll just go through each name on here and just ask people to turn on their camera when I say your name. And first of all, we have on here Rodney White. He is the director of the Logistics Center and the National Veterinary Stockpile, and he's based in Riverdale, Maryland. I can't see.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yep, as Joanna mentioned, my name is Rodney White. I'm the director of the Field Operations Logistics Center. Glad you could join us today. Thanks.
Okay, and next we have our veterinary medical officer. That's the Incident Management Team National Coordinator, Dr. Bethany O'Brien. She's based in Fort Collins, Colorado.
Hello. Thanks, Joanna.
Okay, sure. And then next we have Andy Titsworth, who is our Logistics Management Specialist under our Planning, Preparedness, and Evaluation section. And Andy's based in Riverdale, Maryland.
Hello, all. Thanks for joining.
Thanks. We also have a 3D or depopulation, disposal, and decontamination. We have a program coordinator that's going to work very closely with our other 3D subject matter experts, and then also with the field for coming up with our 3D solutions. And so that position is currently vacant. So hopefully in the next few months, we'll have that filled as well. And then we also have our warehouse that for the most part, so our warehouse is located in Kansas City, Missouri. And many of you may be familiar. So Lisa Brown was our logistics chief. She actually retired back in February. So that position is open. Hopefully that'll be filled in another several weeks as well. But working in the warehouse itself, we have Christopher Bowling. We also have Melody Chatfield, Sharon Stacker. So I'll come back to them. But then we have two other logistics management specialists. And one is also located in Kansas City, the other in Maryland too. So with that, Christopher, if you want to introduce yourself or say hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Christopher. Kadeem.
Hello. Thanks, Joanna.
Yeah. Kadeem, thanks. Henry.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you, and thank you.
Okay, I think I had everybody. I don't know if Melody or Sharon were able to join today either. Okay, and then we've got other people that work out there at the warehouse. We have material handlers. They're the ones that pick all of the supplies in the warehouse and get them packed and shipped to send out to states. We've got transportation assistants. We'll have an equipment mechanic coming online soon. So I just wanted to introduce that because I know a lot of our partners end up working very closely with National Veterinary Stockpile, and I thought it would be nice to be able to put some faces with some names. So the goals of the National Veterinary Stockpile are to be able to deploy these countermeasures within 24 hours of APHIS approval. That's not necessarily 24 hours from the time, and when I say state, I'm saying that collectively, states, tribes, territories. So when the state requests those, there is an approval process. We have to make sure there's funding. We have to kind of clarify, make sure the order is correct. So from the time that the order comes in, we process it, and then we get it turned around and out. And then we assist the states, tribes, and territories on their planning, their training, and the exercising for receiving and acquiring, processing, and distributing those NVS countermeasures. In fact, we kicked off a virtual exercise just this week with West Virginia. We're doing a full-scale exercise with them next week in Virginia for them to receive the stockpile countermeasures, and then kind of walk through their state NVS plan, which we'll get to in just a minute. So the NVS, this is just kind of an example of several of the items that we carry in here. And we've got in this top left-hand corner, if you order something, what's called a module, that's where you have a bunch of supplies just in what's called a tri-wall box where you can reach in there and get it. We have, a lot of supplies are shipped in that. We have cold storage, transportation. We've got panels, chutes, head gates, and then, our transportation services as well, so that we can provide those to our partners. So in planning for your logistics for a disease outbreak, I think that COVID unfortunately gave probably a pretty good lesson to the most of the United States on supply chain and how critical supply chain is to many of the processes that we rely on every day, whether it's, ships that were stuck out in the ocean that couldn't get to ports because people were not able to work, or the slaughter supply chain issues when people that work at slaughterhouses were getting sick from COVID. They couldn't come into work. And so that backed up the entire supply chain system, and then we couldn't get food in grocery stores. So logistics is a critical piece to everything. So we want to help prepare states as much as possible to be ready, first of all, to plan ahead, because any kind of emergency planning is going to help you, even if it's just as much as knowing who your partners are in an outbreak, who you need to contact, where are you going to receive these countermeasures. So just, if you're a planner for your state, go through and ask, what are these countermeasures that you may request? We have bison handling chutes, but for much of the country, they wouldn't need bison handling chutes, but there are a few states that would need that in case there's anything that way. Some states don't have much poultry at all. Others have a lot of poultry. So what are the critical infrastructure and what is the primary animal agriculture in your state that you're going to need to request these countermeasures for? What facility would be able to receive these countermeasures? We talk about warehouses kind of in a general term. It doesn't always mean you have to have a 30,000 square foot warehouse. Sometimes it may just be a few rooms in an office. It may be just kind of the backside of a building. And so who is going to arrange all of that, make sure that it's secured, and then be able to receive whatever it is that's coming in from the NVS? What are some of the other support agencies that you're going to use in an outbreak? We have a lot of different partners with our states. And this is part of where this kind of goes to the state planning. Some states, they rely on their Department of Health, for instance, their State Department of Public Health, because maybe they have an inventory system, especially post-COVID, so that they can receive these supplies. Others, it may be their emergency management agency within their state. Extension is a big partner in a lot of states. We've got their State Department of Wildlife Services, transportation, law enforcement. So there's any number of support agencies that you may need in an outbreak to help in this planning. And so it's always best to get to know your partners ahead of time and not when the emergency is upon you and you have to meet all of these folks in the midst of an emergency. We do carry antiviral medications for humans. We do not have antivirals for animals. So we do carry Tamiflu and Relenza, and that is strictly for state and federal responders. So I've got another slide on that coming up in just a minute, but if you had to receive these antiviral medications, where are you going to receive them, store them, how will they be prescribed to responders and dispensed? Typically that goes through your state public health or your pharmacy board, but we do hold those for responders and then can ship them either to your state or to whatever the dispensing group is in your state. What is your plan for receiving, storing, and distributing foot and mouth disease vaccines? This can also be classical swine fever. We've got those. Hopefully before long, we'll have African swine fever vaccine, but that's a completely different ballgame as far as logistics are concerned because of the cold chain management that we've got in there, the security, how many vaccines a state is getting. We are limited on the number of vaccines for foot and mouth that we have, say for classical swine fever. You know, the need may be in the millions, and maybe we can only get in a few million of those. So there's a lot of planning that goes into that. We've got actually a lot in the National Training and Exercise Program about foot and mouth disease vaccine planning. Who's going to be, if hopefully your state has an incident management team, even just a very basic one, who's going to do your logistics? as y'all know, hopefully, if you've done a lot of the incident command system or ICS courses, you're familiar with the logistics section, and they fall under the command and general staff with the incident commander. And then who's going to be in the supply unit? They're going to be the ones that are primarily receiving, repackaging, and distributing these supplies that are coming from the NVS and then getting them out to the field. When we talk about inventory management, every state is different on this. So there is not one blanket inventory management program that the NVS provides to the states, because what one state may use could be completely different, because you may have different partners that are helping with your inventory management. As I mentioned before, some states have used their public health inventory management system, and that's their partner when they have to receive it. We have one state that may use public health. We have another one that uses a state agriculture agency, but it's in a completely different section of donated food for the ones that provide meals to children during the summertime or during the school year. So every state has a different inventory management system. So there is not one blanket one that we provide, because every state is going to be different how they need to manage that. We can help you kind of come up with some things, make some recommendations. And then that's when we do the exercises with states, is we partner with whatever their other with whatever their other state agencies would be, so that we can work on these inventory management systems. And then how would you train any of your logistics responders ahead of time before the outbreak happens? And then what about any just-in-time training materials that you may need at the time of the outbreak? And this is just kind of really a basic schematic of the interplay between operations and logistics. Our goal in an animal disease outbreak, that is to eradicate the disease, conduct surveillance, get trade going again. So that's the primary goal whenever we have a disease outbreak. So very basically, we're identifying the disease and the species. What is our response strategy? And then how are we going to conduct that? And then what are all the supplies and equipment that are going to be needed to support those eradication and surveillance activities? So that's preparing for your logistics activation. There's a lot of preparation that goes into receiving resources. What's your logistics response going to be? Who's going to be staffing that? Where's it going to be? What's your inventory management system? And then how are we supporting the operational response? And that can include our 3D contractors, that can include your cold chain, the antivirals. So what are all the logistics support pieces to that operation? And some of you may be familiar with FEMA with their THIRA, that's the threat hazard reduction. And so for your entity, for whether you're state, tribe, or territory, ask yourselves, what do you need to prepare for? What are your biggest risks? I mean, we're seeing that unfortunately right now, say with Hurricane Beryl, that started in the Caribbean, came through Mexico, but now it's hitting Texas. Unfortunately, Texas is very familiar with hurricane preparedness. Much of the southeastern states are, but we don't often deal with blizzards in the southeast or wildfires. Out west you do. So what are the biggest risks that you have? Take that principle that you have, say, for disaster preparedness, apply that to your animal agriculture. As I mentioned before, what are the big agriculture industries in your state? Maybe you're a pork state, cattle, or maybe you have a mix of both. Do you have a lot of industry in your state, or is it maybe a smaller state that has more backyard or smaller farms on there? To what level of capability do you need to be prepared? How much do you really, this comes down to how much do you have already? What resources do you have? And what are you going to need to request and from whom? And so that's where that gap analysis comes in. Who are your other state agencies that can help? And then how are you going to fill those gaps? Who are you going to ask for assistance? What will you need to order? We have some states that maybe have a pretty robust incident management team for their state response already. Some of them may not have anything, whether it's they are not very far in their planning or they just have a really small state with very few people on there. So there could be a variety of different reasons that you may not have that. I mean, in many cases, it's your state legislature that provides a lot of the funding for emergency planning and management, animal disease response. In some states have more resources than others to do that. So what are your needs in your state? And then that's where we help try and fill in some of those logistics gaps. And then this is just an example, just, something that's very basic, just to start to list what you do have, what inventory and resources do you have in your state, and what's your worst case scenario. Consider all of your potential stakeholders in this. And then what do you think that you may be requesting from the National Veterinary Stockpile? All right, let's see, I've got a couple of questions in here real quick. Okay, thanks. Yeah, Andy posted the NSM 16 in the chat. The link to the entire document if anyone wanted to check on that. All right, so when a state needs to request assistance during an emergency, there is a process that we go through for this. One second, my slides got stuck. So we have what's called the NVS State Planning. We have the state planning guide, a template, and then a supply unit guide that we provide to states. It's really just kind of directions and template for how you can do this. The bulk of it is around logistics, but it does have many of the other emergency planning and response principles in there that you can fill in. You're going to have essentially the same contact list, whether it's your logistics response, operations. You're going to need to know who your finance people are so they can help get some of your resources there. Who might your transportation resources be in the state? So when you do that gap analysis and figure out who your partners are, you have this part that we call in the state planning guide, it's called Appendix B, but this is how you request NVS resources. So if the worst happens in your state, then so the SAHO, that's the state animal health official, usually a state veterinarian, and your area veterinarian in charge, or AVIC, that's the vet services vet in charge in the state. So you determine that all of your resources have been or will soon be exhausted. You've used up everything that you have. And then you agree that the NVS support is needed. They would conduct their vet services district office district director, of which we have 4. Then the district office would contact the 24/7 hotline to let us know that those resources are needed. Then the NVS director returns the call, acknowledges the request, and then initiates a conference call with several different parties. And this could be our National Preparedness and Incident Coordination Group that is part of Vet Services, could be our leadership, because we have to get approval, especially on that very first state. If you're the first state to have a disease outbreak, then we've got to make sure that that funding is available so that we can get everything prepared and ship it out as quickly as possible. And so once APHIS approves that and says, yep, we agree that we are going to provide resources for a state, and really, if it's foot and mouth disease, avian influenza, classical swine fever, all of our big bad diseases, our foreign animal diseases, these will get approved. And so then the ICS 213, that is the form that is used to request resources from the National Veterinary Stockpile. We are really trying to move into having our resources ordered through EMERS, or the Emergency Management Response System, that probably many of you are familiar with. And it's an electronic record, and that really simplifies the process a lot. And so actually Thursday, Andy is going to go into more detail about that. So APHIS approves, you get your 213 submitted to us, and then the DMT, those are the folks that work at the warehouse. And so then that team picks the order, packages it, and then gets it shipped out. And then, like I said, 24 hours of approval. And then steps 1 through 4 really could happen in a matter of minutes or hours, kind of depending on where we are in those steps. So are there any questions on this so far? I'm looking at my chat box and see. And one big reason we wanted to do this webinar is that we have just published our updated National Veterinary Stockpile catalog. And so the last one was in 2018. And so this one was just released at the end of May. So we wanted to, and so towards the end of this talk, I'll go into a little bit more detail about what's in there. And then if you would like to request a copy of the catalog, you see the email on there. It is available in our NVS SharePoint site. And so that's something, if you're a federal employee, I'll share the SharePoint site link here in just a minute. So you request that. If you are a non-APHIS employee, there's a little bit different process. Again, send an email to that NVS at USDA.gov and say, I would like access to the SharePoint site. And that's where you can find the catalog, the state planning guide, and many of our other tools that we have for the National Veterinary Stockpile. And this describes the available NVS countermeasures. Now, in this catalog, it does not have, here's what the contractors will do for you. That's a different topic that we'll get to in just a minute. But check your table of contents for what is available in there too. And this is a PDF document. It is password protected. And the reason for that is that we don't, because it's part of the national security, as I explained before with the HSPD 9 and now the National Security Memo 16, food and ag is considered a critical infrastructure and can be a target for terrorism. So that's why we try and control how widely shared the catalog is. So we don't publish it online. We don't share it with a really wide audience outside of our stakeholders. So that's why. But you'll see here a lot of the deployable countermeasures that we do have. We have got personal protective equipment, and that is your coveralls, masks, boot covers, gloves, all of that. Decontamination supplies, animal vaccines, the vaccine shipping in portable storage containers, antiviral medications for humans, poultry depopulation, foaming units, carbon dioxide carts, whole house carbon dioxide for birds. We've got captive bolt units, animal handling equipment, and then those response support services or contractors, as we typically know them. So what we are able to provide is what's called a 24-hour push pack. We came up with this was really before 2014-15 when all of our avian influenza outbreaks really kind of got underway. So you can order kind of all of your bulk supplies into one, but then what we have found over time is that not everybody needs all of that quantity of everything all at once, because honestly, you're turning around a lot of your PPE supplies, your decontamination supplies. They're getting turned around pretty quickly and sent out to the field. And so you can either order items individually, or we can put them into modules so that you can have kind of a big bulk pack coming to you as well. Some of the poultry depopulation equipment that we offer, and as I mentioned, we've got the KIFCO foam units. We have got the ProPack backpack foamers. I think a lot of states really like those backpack foamers because they're pretty cost effective. A lot of states have bought their own. And so for some smaller flocks, backyard flocks, these backpack foamers have proved to be really helpful on that. We do have a whole house CO2 unit that is deployed with the contractors. Many of you may be familiar with that. That is where really we essentially wrap the house in Tyvek, and then we put carbon dioxide gas into the house, and then the birds fall asleep, and that's their method of depopulation. If you see down there in that bottom middle picture, that's the manifold that gets hooked up to the CO2 truck, and then it gets pumped into the house. The reason we have not used that more in this high path outbreak that started in 2022 is that after COVID, especially, carbon dioxide has been very, very difficult to source. We don't have a national contract for CO2. There's many reasons for that, but a lot of times the companies are not interested in doing national contracts. They make carbon dioxide kind of as needed, and they don't want necessarily to commit to a large quantity for it for a particular sector, you know, because they're making money off of carbonated drinks, machinery, all kinds of things. So we would really just be another customer for that. And so CO2 companies have not, and they're very regional too. You know, one section may have Praxair in their part of the country, another may have Airgas. So there are a lot of different providers of that across the United States. So we'd like to use CO2 when possible, but the supply of CO2 has been kind of an issue in the last few years. We also have turkey euthanasia devices. They're obviously bigger birds, and so this is similar to a captive bolt for turkeys because you may not be able to get enough foam. Sometimes those toms are pretty big, and it would take a lot of foam to do that. So in some cases, people would prefer to use these TEDs. You can also use it if your other depopulation method fails, and we need to continue euthanizing any of the birds that are still alive after that. We've got our CO2 carts. These are the blue carts that you see in the bottom left-hand side of your screen. You put birds in there, typically layers or smaller birds. We put carbon dioxide in there, and then that's their method of depopulation. We also have a CO2 trailer. Some people call them the MAC carts, but that's one where you see it in the top right-hand corner. You have several canisters of carbon dioxide in there. And then there's kind of an acrylic box on the backside of it. And then we can put birds in there. Again, applying CO2 to that. And then the nice thing on this is that you're able to kind of lift it. You can put a fair number of birds in there, and then it makes it easier to dispose of as well, because you can just keep them moving along. And then you see there in the bottom right-hand corner, we've got just another foam unit trailer. Other equipment that we have in here, we've got captive bolt, a few different kinds and sizes and different cartridge sizes that you see there. We have animal handling equipment, vaccination supplies, and we've got more 3D technology under development. So as you guys know, as state agriculture and animal stakeholders, you know, we can't really go to Lowe's, and Rodney has said this many times, there's not a lot of off-the-shelf solutions for what we have to do in our animal disease control. So we work with engineers, we work with other states that have come up with technologies to do this. We want to try and do this as efficiently and pain-free as possible for the animals so that we can stop the spread of disease. I didn't really get to look at all the different participants that we have on here, but just to kind of back up just a second. So for many of our diseases, they can shut down trade. We have public health risks, interstate movement of animals. And so we don't give animals therapeutics like antibiotics, antivirals. In many cases, our method of stopping the pathogen from moving is to depopulate the animals so there are no more hosts to spread this. And so in doing that, we come up with our depopulation methods, and we follow the AVMA euthanasia, but more specifically the depopulation guidelines that came out in 2019. I think they're working on an update to that. So we follow the AVMA guidelines. And I will say about that, AVMA does not approve any particular method of depopulation. I think that word approval is used a lot. They can make recommendations depending on the circumstances. So there are not approved AVMA methods. They may be recommended, not recommended. Our 3D response support services, our contractors. So they can assist in depopulation of birds. They have been trained in foaming, whole house CO2, wrapping and application of that. But we typically, so we don't use contractors to do any kind of large animal depopulation, as y'all can imagine, for reasons. So our 3D contractors, they are typically all hazards responders. So they're responding to oil spills, maybe they're responding to widespread electrical outages somewhere. They're, maybe, floods, different things like that. So they're kind of all hazards responders. And so we have to train them in how to do this for animal agriculture. So we are able to train them for many of our for many of our poultry. And so we've been able to do that. But for a lot of safety reasons and animal handling, we don't really do that with large animals. But when they come for poultry depopulation, they are the ones that really hold our poultry foam units, those larger trailers that you see. They have our whole house CO2. So there are different sites around the country. And when a state orders that or requests it, then you get the foaming unit, you get the contractors or whole house CO2, whatever it may be. So when you ask them for that foaming support, they come with the trained contractors. They have a team of them. They're the ones that set it up, break it down. They get the foam out there to the birds. And then if you need them to help clean up, you just need to make sure and put that in the contract. So there's a variety of things. I think probably a lot of people on this call have experience with them. And so these companies are available through USDA contracts. And so they're kind of on a cycle on when their contract is. And like I said, they're located around the country, and then they travel to wherever it is that the contract sends them when it's requested. We don't share the location of those, again, because we have a lot of our critical supplies and equipment that are in there. We have had people in the past that have kind of tried to break in and steal any of that equipment. There's some valuable equipment on there as well. So they stay in a secure location, several around the country, and then it comes with those contractors as well. So just kind of a quick word about animal vaccinations. There are many, there are a lot of other exercises, especially with Farm Bill, and states are doing animal vaccination exercises. So I won't go into great detail, but what we do have available are classical swine fever vaccines, foot and mouth disease vaccines. And so we have two different vaccine banks. There's the North American vaccine bank, and then there's also now a US bank, thanks to the Farm Bill. I think that one went through in 2018 that funded that one. But the activation of these banks will require the approval of our Chief Veterinary Officer of the United States. Right now, it's Dr. Rosemary Sifford. But by protocol, they have to be able to approve that. And especially for the North American Bank, because we have another country that's involved, and they kind of get a proportion of what is needed based on which country it is. And so then the CBOs, discuss and agree to those vaccine distribution as well. The US Bank, they're also working on other countermeasures. I think eventually they'll have, other diagnostic tests and not other therapeutics, but we'll be able to add other vaccines to that if we ever get African swine fever. So we have a completely different unit, and that's under diagnostics and biologics. And so when these vaccines are requested, like I said, there's other webinars for that one. And so I encourage y'all to look through those. But so the requesting of the vaccine goes through our National Preparedness and Incident Coordination. It gets approved at very high levels, who gets which vaccines. But when NVS gets the order that says, okay, this state will have this many doses of vaccines, and that's when we ship it to that state. And then as of 2021, that's when states are starting to pilot a lot of these vaccine plans and doing a lot of these exercises. All right, sorry, I was just checking the chat in there to see if I missed anything. All right. So for cold chain management, our vaccines typically need to stay between 2 and 8 degrees Celsius. And so when they are shipped to a state, they need to maintain that temperature throughout the life of the vaccine, from the time it's received at the state until the time it gets into the animal. And so we have different cold chain management solutions for that. We've got thermal packaging solutions. We do have some mobile refrigeration units, temperature data loggers, different technologies, and those are kind of being updated by the vaccine companies all the time too. And we do have a cold chain contractor. So let's see. I think I had another one that has some of the cold chain. So you'll see here there's a kind of a crate down there in the middle, and so that has some ice pads, kind of alternating refrigerator and freezer, kind of this cells, like, when you put in your own freezer, you've got one that is frozen. And so we have that to try to maintain that temperature in that. And then you see on the right hand side, that is it's called a temp tail, and that tells the temperature. And so you see it's got a USB that goes inside the box that is able to tell what the temperature is. And so then there's a different, there's a reporting method for that, because if there's excursions, there's different, we need to find out from the manufacturer whether or not those vaccines are able to work. So let's see, questions on that one. I'll try and take some of those. As I mentioned before, antiviral medications, these are for state, federal, tribal responders only. And so that decision is typically made kind of at the state level with the APHIS health and safety officers. So, right now that we've got high path and dairy cattle, there I think are some discussions within some states about whether or not to mobilize that on the human health side. But your state NVS plan should have some kind of section in there on if your state requests these antiviral medications, how are you going to receive it, store it, how it be described and prescribed and dispensed. As veterinarians, we are not the ones that would be prescribing it to anyone. That's why I say this is where you really need to have your state health department or your pharmaceutical board, whomever the dispensing authority is in your state. That's who you need to work with on how these will be dispensed. We are just the ones that hold it. We ship it there, and then you work with the state on how that's dispensed. So when we move on to how any of our resources are requested, this is the ICS 213RR. Many people that go through ICS training, they are familiar with this form. It's 213RR. This has just been tweaked a bit specific to the National Veterinary Stockpile for the information that the Logistics Center needs to have in shipping those supplies out there. So it says available on EMERS. Over the years, we've really tried to put, encourage states to put all they can in EMERS because it gets approved a lot quicker. So for every request that is made, then it goes through an approval process so that we can track where everything is going and where our resources are. When it's done electronically through EMERS, that whole electronic chain can happen pretty quickly. And then we can electronically see what resources are going where. The catalog items are also located in EMERS, and so that's put in there. And then, so this 213RR, that is where you make your request for the quantity, what the name is, the stock number, where it's going, what time it needs to be there, who's ordering it, who the points of contact are. So all this information needs to be collected to make your order. The required times and dates that you need these resources. Are there any special instructions? We typically recommend make sure you have somewhere that has a loading dock in case we have some of these bigger shipments that may require to be palletized and need to have a forklift to be able to take that off. Sometimes we can just do shipments of a few boxes. Other times we do have delivery trucks that need to be able, that has packages that need to be forklifted out of the truck and into a warehouse. And then, like I said, we have to go through logistics and then finance approval for that. And when I bring up this Form 1 in the state plan template, that is another one of those planning guides that we have available for states. So for 3D questionnaires, when I mentioned the 3D response contractors, these are the ones that come out and do some of your foam depopulation, help with any of your 3D activities that are out there. So Andy will go into more detail on Thursday, both about this 3D questionnaire and ordering through EMERS. But really what I want to convey to you is that this questionnaire is the information that is used to create the statement of work for the contractor. And it says, here is exactly what we need you to do. And so whenever usually an ops section chief fills this out, be very, very specific on what you need those contractors to do, because the contracting officer writes the contract from that. So there was an experience several years ago. Somebody needed them actually to pick up eggs in, I think it was a layer house. Well, so that wasn't put in the contract. Well, you can't just in the middle of an operation say, oh, by the way, can you do this too? We can't do that with contractors. And so be very specific in what your ask is, because if you need to add to it, that takes time because it has to go back through contracting, through approvals. So that takes a lot of time to modify that contract. So try and be very specific in the beginning when you're filling out this questionnaire. What type of support is going to be required, geographic locations, preferably GPS coordinates, the number of premises that they'll be needed on, the specific tasks, the number of personnel you think may be needed, and then what kind of NVS equipment. Do you need a foaming unit? Do you need whole house CO2? Do you need CO2 carts? And so this questionnaire is also Form 2 in the NVS state plan template. And just a quick word about our vet services incident management teams. And so this is where Dr. Bethany O'Brien, she's the leader of our VS IMTs. But because we're talking about resource ordering, just wanted to give a quick word about that. So with VS, with our incident management teams, we have our trained responders for animal disease outbreaks. So they are not federally or state certified and are not considered an asset outside of vet services. People are familiar with, say, the firefighting teams that battle firefighters, and you can have these different levels. That is not what our IMTs are. And so we have 5 incident management teams, each with 14 positions, 2 in each positions. And so you see some of those, that's the command and general staff, the general sections, and then we have unique positions just for vet services, like an epidemiologist, disease reporting officer, EMERS. And then the area veterinarian in charge is the one that can request the incident management team to assist their state. And then that goes through the national incident coordinator. So I was hoping maybe Bethany, let's see. All right, sorry, I was just checking the chats in there. Bethany, is there anything that you wanted to, while we were talking about resources, I just wanted to bring that up about IMTs since it's under, is there anything that you wanted to add on that one? I don't want to go into great detail, but at least wanted people to be aware of it. All right, any other questions up to this point? I was trying to keep up with the chat. I think Andy is covering those and sharing links in the chat. So the resources that we have available for our partners, as I mentioned before, sorry, went backwards. We have the state planning guides, a state template, and a supply unit guide, and these are fillable so that it can be customized for each state. That we have a lot of states that have had NVS plans in the past. We've had these available, I think maybe 15, 18 years. And so maybe somebody had a plan, say in 2012, but now with time and with turnover, maybe somebody doesn't know where that NVS plan is or just hasn't been updated in quite a while. So if your state does have an NVS plan, just review it. Who are your personnel that have changed hands since the last time you put the plan out there? Contact information, is that up to date? Does it does it reflect the current threats to animal agriculture? What facilities are going to be able to cooperate? What kind of new resources in an updated plan? Was the state able to buy any resources? I know a lot of states and industry for that matter, they've bought their own foam units. So maybe you have that now. And then has your state veterinarian approved and signed the plan? And so these are not plans that the NVS needs to review and approve for you to be able to get NVS resources. This is to be able to expedite the ordering, receipt, delivery, and distribution of your resources in an outbreak. But we do want the state veterinarian to be able to review and sign the plan so that we know that it has gone to the highest change within the state so that they know what those resources are, that we have a plan, you have the logistics plan, and can move with that. Just like anything else, the planning is the most important part of it. We have the plan, it's going to be modified, it's going to change in an outbreak, but the most important part is the planning and having something on there. We found that in many states over the years is that we need to know who those contacts and who those resources are, where they may be in the state at the time. We need to know where your water supply is coming from, where may your carbon come from, what kind of transportation is locally available within your state. So there's a lot of different pieces to that. And so this is an example or just kind of the cover page of our state planning template. And so this is our most recent one, is 2023. We typically do an update every 2 years. And so in this most recent state plan, you can also, this is also located on our SharePoint site. You can also send it to the NVS mailbox and we can send that to you as well. But this is very helpful, I think. So we have standard language across all sections. This is all following incident command system. It's following HCP guidelines, the state fillable tabs. We also have a lot of different forms that are in there. We also have the state planning guide, and that's got a lot of best practices for emergencies. It's got a supply unit guide. That supply unit guide is actually pretty good for just-in-time training too. And then really my primary job is to work with states to develop these plans. We do workshops. We also, we work with our state partners there, and then we work our way up to having workshops to tabletop exercises. We come to you for these exercises. We have a training contractor and we work through your plan and then ultimately have this full-scale exercise where we ship our training resources to you. We have anybody that you have that's involved in that plan. Like I said, next week we go to West Virginia and we are shipping supplies out there so that they can practice receiving it, putting it in an inventory, picking those resources, and then getting it distributed out wherever it's going. So we do a very hands-on, full-scale exercise. So if anybody's interested in that and your state hasn't done it in a while, please email me and also send it to the NVS inbox. We're happy to help you do that and help states plan on this. So some of the things that you may go through when you're doing your state plan, you want to look at these different categories: equipment, supplies, your storage facilities, your logistics staff, what will you do for vaccines and antivirals. So there's a correlating section in the state plan and template for these. For example, your equipment, We've got the NVS 3D questionnaire for creating that statement of work. For supplies, you've got your 213RR. Storage facilities, guidance on location. So we've got guidance all throughout that. And then working up to the full scale exercise. So happy to share that with anybody. Like I said, it's customizable. So you take and use that as the best method for your state and your planning. And as I mentioned before, the state animal health official, they are the ones that approve the state plan. We do not approve it. We just help you create it. And then we can also help you exercise it as well. And right now, this is the progress of the written plans that we've got in the United States. The ones that are green have, they have already got approved plans. And then the ones that are yellow, those are in progress. We're working with several of the states now. The red ones, those are the ones that have no plan right now. That is only our territory. So we've got most everyone covered, and this is current as of May 2024. So again, if your state is on here, even if you are a green state, but you are not sure if your NVS plan has been updated, even where it is, no shame in that, because you know, there's a lot in that boat. There's a lot that's gone on the last 9 or 10 years. So if you're interested in updating that, please contact me and we'd be happy to work with you on getting that updated. And as I mentioned before, we do exercise with the states. And we work with your representative, could be your emergency coordinator, your AVICs, it's whomever your stakeholders are that you want there. And as I mentioned, we do workshops, so that can be for anybody. I do those virtually for you. Then we come out there for tabletop exercises. The tabletop we do is typically a one-day discussion. We come in the afternoon before, get everything set up, go through it, and then you can invite your stakeholders, and it's about a 6 or 7 hour tabletop. Based on your state plan. We have 4 different scenarios you can choose from, and then we just work through that. You can pick whether it's high path, either ASF or CSF, foot and mouth disease. And so we just work through that scenario and exercise that plan. We do the after action plan, say, okay, here's some areas where we need some improvement, work on that. And then about a year or so later, that's when we do the full scale exercise and we ship the resources to the state and do all the hands-on part of this. We create the improvement plan. There is a cooperative agreement that we offer for states so that you can have people travel in if they need to be part of the exercise, because typically this is an entire full day for the full scale, which requires that people may be able to travel in there. The day prior, we have a lot of people that set up. So that's a possibility as well if you're interested. And this is just describing the Homeland Security exercise. If y'all are familiar with HSEEP, that's all this is. It's just showing the progression from planning to training and the degree of capabilities that you're doing there. If anyone's interested, this is your typical state preparedness cycle where you review your plans, your lessons learned, you modify your plans, you assess your needs, then you conduct your training, exercise it, and then you start the cycle over again. So it is a constant cycle of planning, training, and exercising, improving, and then starting the cycle over again. This is just some photographs from an Oklahoma full-scale exercise we did a couple of years ago. You see we're getting in some placebo vaccine that are in there. We tested some of the cold chain. These are some of the modules or the boxes that are sent in there. Everybody's unloading that, checking the inventory that's in there. This was a good idea. So this was a huge warehouse that they used during COVID. And so they had a very clever idea. They used a bike to move a lot of the boxes around so that, you know, we got on our steps definitely on that day and during an outbreak. So that was kind of a creative way. I thought that was a fun way to put in there too. This is an example of the temp tail that I described, and you can see on there, if the vaccines are supposed to be 2 to 8 degrees Celsius, this one is out of range. It was at 10.9 when this picture was taken. And so you plug in this USB and it gives you the time and date report, and it shows what the temperature was from the time it was packed and that temp tail was attached until the time that you plug it into a computer. So that was, excuse me, kind of a good exercise for that. All right, and then with these last couple of minutes, let's go through the catalog. The catalog has been sent to our AVICs, district directors, emergency coordinators, IMTs, and different sections within that. So they should all have a copy of that now. And then also with state stakeholders, I believe it's gone out to think it's gone out to the Nasaho group. But again, please request that. We are happy to send it. But we did not want to do mass email to all of the state groups for the reasons I mentioned before, is that it is what we consider sensitive material. And we want to have a bit of a control. We've had some people request the catalog that have absolutely nothing to do with animal disease response, whether or not they just wanted to publish something. Sometimes it may be people with kind of more nefarious purposes. So we do control the distribution of this. So we have this NVS SharePoint site. Andy has put those links in the chat for APHIS personnel, because this is an internal site for APHIS. When you make that request, we see it and we accept it. For any non-APHIS partners, you make that request, you can send it to the nvs@usda.gov if you want to be in that SharePoint site. I say we validate your employment. We just make sure that you are who you say you are and you're not some outside person that's not really a stakeholder. We get you a guest email address, and then you would have access to that. That usually takes 3 to 5 days because we have to go through our IT department to be able to get that guest email address. But please go ahead and make those requests. Happy to do it for you. And then this is just an example of what you'll find in the catalog. We've got personal protective equipment, decontamination supplies, Virkon, test strips, sampling and diagnostic supplies. One thing I want to mention about that is the NVS is strictly for foreign animal disease response, not for program diseases. So this is not where you order supplies for brucellosis, tuberculosis, pseudorabies. This is strictly for foreign animal diseases. Animal handling equipment, happy to say we now have a lot of snares. We have hog panels. We have some carcass carts. So we have a lot more swine handling equipment now in these last couple of years. We've got poultry and swine depopulation equipment, cold chain vaccine and coolers. Those cool temp boxes that you've seen, and they can keep the contents at 2 to 8 degrees for up to 5 days. So those are pretty handy. Modules can be made to order. You kind of pick what you need and we put it in a module for you. And like I said, preferably ordered through EMERS. So some of the key points of this catalog, it is a password protected file. You can request the password through us. Even if you go through the SharePoint site, you'll click on another attachment in there that says, to email us to request the password. So once you get it, just please keep up with it. We'll give it to you again, but just for your ease, we'll send that to you. As I mentioned, this is only for foreign animal disease response, not for program disease activities. And it's just for state and federal responders, has to be ordered through our regulatory officials and not to be, we don't have industry and producers or the public ordering NVS resources. There's a process we go through. PPE supplies are only for federal and state regulatory responders. These are not for producers. They are not for on-site contractors, not for the public. So please, if you order PPE, don't just leave it sitting out for anybody to be able to come and take whatever PPE is in there. There are a lot of reasons for that. One of which is the liability for having personal protective equipment. If somebody puts on coveralls and a mask, they don't know how to use it properly, then they get sick and they say, well, I got my PPE from the National Veterinary Stockpile. We can be liable for that. We also want to make sure that we're using our resources wisely. PPE costs a lot of money, and our mission and our charge in USDA is we're protecting animal agriculture. The contractors are supposed to bring their own PPE, public health. They can work with the public on how they can get PPE, but these are strictly for our regulatory responders. We don't share the quantities or locations of items that are in the stockpile. As I mentioned, we have contractors around the country that have some of the equipment. We have a warehouse in Kansas City, but we don't share those numbers or locations. We have states say, well, we want to know what NVS has. How many do you have of this so that we can plan? But keep in mind, we are a national asset. So I'm just picking a number. Maybe we have 12 foamers and you say, well, I'll be able to use one of NVS's foamers. But if there are outbreaks around the country, which is what's happened in this last couple of years, maybe we don't have the foamers that you were counting on already. They may be deployed somewhere else, or maybe it'll take a couple of days to get to you because of where they're deployed now. So just kind of plan accordingly. And like I said, request submit on the 213RR, preferably through EMERS. Talked about password protection. And then also in the catalog, this just kind of you know, again, shares why it's a restricted catalog. It's for official use only. Safeguard handling, please do not release it to the public. Not any reproduction, whole and part without prior approval. So we just submitted on the need to know, but I have shared with you all those resources on how you can do that. Again, SharePoint site, this is what it looks like. We're currently updating a lot of the information that's in there, but right now you can find the catalog, the state plans. We're working on updating some of the Q&A sheets that we have in there. So just please be patient, just kind of keep coming back and visiting, and we'll be updating that as we go. And then just a few last minute things. So some of the limitations with National Veterinary Stockpile, we primarily use UPS and FedEx for most of our shipments from the warehouse. We don't have our own fleet of drivers that are available 24/7. So we do rely on them. We have a contractor that we can use in emergencies, but primarily we use FedEx and UPS. So that being said, there's a last time that they're able to pick up in the day. So we ask states to please submit your orders as soon. Am I good, Kristen?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. So please get your orders in by 4 Eastern. Otherwise, they may not ship until the next day. Please keep in mind Fridays, weekends. We'll accommodate in emergencies, but if you need something Monday morning, and you already know you're going to need it, please try and get it ordered, you know, Wednesday, Thursday. Some go by trucks, not many go by air. So just please keep shipping in time, and that we don't have our own fleet that we can just drive it to you. We talked about cores just a little bit. So the contract officer representative for our contractors, they have to be federal employees because we're committing federal money. The task order or the duties that are in that contract any changes have to go through a contracting officer via the Corps. So if you're on site somewhere, you can't really ask a contractor, hey, can you do this as long as you're here? That's not what they're paid for. They are paid specifically for those duties that are in their contract, nothing more, but nothing less either. They also have to fulfill the terms of the contract. And that Corps should have a copy of the statement of work so that they can keep that contractor on task. And then I think I've talked a lot about these 3D services and using that questionnaire, and then Andy's going to cover that more extensively on Thursday. And that's usually completed by the ops section chief. So I believe that was yep. And then just a reminder to join us again on Thursday at 2 Eastern about ordering resources. And okay, let me look real quick and see what kind of questions are in the chat. I think Andy's tried to cover the ones that I was not able to.
Hey, Joanna, this is Mindy, because I keep asking all the questions.
No, that's okay. I was just trying to catch up on chat, and I just thought, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I saw in the NVS goals on your slide that it said to deploy within 24 hours against damaging animal disease and during natural disasters. Can you kind of elaborate, or any of the NVS, on what, because I never ever seen it been utilized in a natural disaster.
Yeah, and it's pretty rare on doing that. We've had some pretty severe ones like Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. So a lot of the statutory language kind of at the USDA level and say at Homeland Security, that's kind of what the statutory language is. But USDA is typically not the lead for natural disasters. It's usually I know. So if anybody doesn't know Mindy Buswell, she's very experienced in all of the emergency stuff. So it's typically local and state that is the lead agency for disasters. And so we could be support for that. So a lot of times that ends up being more of a support role rather than a lead role. And APHIS, Animal Care, is the lead agency for disaster support. So, you know, we don't typically provide a lot in the way of disaster support. Like I said, and I don't know if Andy or if Rodney's still on, he may want to kind of chime in on this one. The ones that I can think of are pretty severe ones like Hurricane Maria. I don't think we were really stood out that much during Hurricane Katrina. So it's really kind of the bigger ones. And a lot of times it's support. It's that we're doing disease surveillance after we've had widespread flooding. So I don't know that that's the greatest answer other than to say that we're usually not the lead agency in any kind of natural disasters. And then I think it's kind of on a case-by-case basis.
And Joanna, just as is Rodney, so typically, you kind of hit it point on where typically a mission assignment comes through from FEMA. We would be a support agency, and normally our contractors would be utilized. And I know early on in like 2008, Gustav, and some of you may have been here back then, where we've had a couple of floods go on, and our contractors were leveraged to assist and support. So rare, but they have been used.
Yes, thank you.
That helps. So Justin, I think I've understood that question. So yeah, if you're interested in working on a tabletop, then I would be your main point of contact. And so the screen that's up right now, that's got my email and my phone number on there. I think if I'm understanding your question, if you're interested in that, then yep, just contact me about that. I don't see any other questions in the chat.
I believe all the questions have been answered in the chat.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody's time. And again, try and join us on Thursday to learn about how to, more specifics about how to request these resources. And feel free to reach out to me or the NVS inbox, and we'll be happy to answer questions. Have a good afternoon.
Thanks everyone for joining. You can go ahead and disconnect now.